Margaret Thatcher retired from public life after suffering stroke in 2002. Baroness Thatcher, known by friends and foes as the Iron Lady for being tough and outspoken, led the Conservative Party to 3 election victories from 1979 to 1990. She stood as the longest-serving British Prime Minister and the only female to have served in that capacity. While in office, Thatcher implemented uncompromising policies come to be known as Thatcherism. She introduced a series of political and economic initiatives to turn around what she termed Britain's precipitous national decline, which included deregulation of the financial sector, flexible labor markets, reducing the power of trade unions, among others. These policies made her unpopular as recession and high unemployment were on the increase, but the economic recovery and 1982 Falklands War between Britain and Argentina revitalized support for her, leading to her re-election in 1983. She resigned as Prime Minister and party leader in November 1990, following Michael Heseltine's challenge to her leadership. Leaders from around the world have paid condolences to her death. Among them was the Queen of England, Elizabeth II, who described her death as sad.
In the meantime, President Goodluck Jonathan has described Baroness Margaret Thatcher as one of the greatest leaders of our time. In a message of condolence to the government and people of Great Britain and members of the Commonwealth, signed by Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Ruben Abati, the President said she attained a legendary status in her lifetime after positively transforming Britain in her 11.5 years as Prime Minister. He said the late Prime Minister will be eternally honored for serving her country with immense passion and strong-willed determination, as well as for the great transformation that resulted from her economic and social policies. The President said Baroness Thatcher will be remembered by the world for her unique, distinctive and purposeful leadership, which restored pride and respect to her country and made a resurgent Great Britain a force to be reckoned with on the global stage. He assured Prime Minister David Cameron and the people of Britain that the government and people of Nigeria share in their grief. And joining me now to discuss the legacies of the late Prime Minister Thatcher is a Pan-African scholar of international affairs and a member of the House of Representatives, Professor Chudi Uwazurike. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Well, first let's look at Baroness Margaret Thatcher to Great Britain and to the international community.
Well, very clearly, Baroness Margaret Thatcher was a major historical figure of the Cold War era. It's extremely important to understand her in the context of the Cold War, which erupted after World War II from 1945. But she did not become a factor in British politics until 1961, when she was appointed the junior minister and served in various capacities under various prime ministers, notably Edward Heath, until she became the prime minister in 1979. It's very important to understand that Margaret Thatcher during her time was not only colorful but also controversial, as has been said, and is a testimony to the fact that history tends to mellow people's reputation over time. During the Cold War, she was no friend of Africa, as a matter of fact. She clearly thought of Nelson Mandela as a terrorist and dismissed the African National Congress as a terrorist organization, refused to meet with the leaders such as Tambo and the rest of them. Instead, she welcomed people like P.W. Botha, the South African Prime Minister, and so on, right up to the very end. She still thought apartheid wasn't so bad after all. But I would say that very clearly, people are paying tribute to her for being a very strong and decisive leader. She always says she was not, in her words, she wasn't a consensus politician, that she was a conviction politician. So very clearly, this is a woman with her own mind who clearly understood some of what was needed. But her own rigidity could be a pro as it could be a con.
All right. What was British-Nigeria relations like during the Thatcher years?
She came to power in '79, just as the Second Republic was about to commence. she didn't really think much of Africa, much of Nigeria as such, in any fundamental way, good or ill, really, so long as we're not a strategic asset in the Cold War, which was what she and her soulmate, Ronald Reagan of America, really cared about. We really didn't exist. The fundamental policy for British foreign policy at the time was the Cold War. They had all these nuclear throwaways directed at them, and that's survival was really an issue. So Margaret Thatcher really saw the world in terms of the old prism of if you are with us, as opposed to be against us and so on.
The world remembers her as having led Britain to war against Argentina over the Falklands.
Yes. Yes, you know, the Falklands War. It was one of those skirmishes. You look back and say, my God, what was this all about? A couple of thousands of ships, for instance, a few British citizens manning their ship, and over an island that really had nothing else to offer. And she sends a 40,000-man army, 8,000 miles around the world, at the cost of 12 million British pounds and so on. It was both brave as well as foolish in the judgment of historians. But I understand, for instance, the president said that her leadership restored Britain to global reckoning, and that was also strategic, because after that,
okay.
People...
Now, using that as a peg,
Okay.
what does it say? What does it speak for Nigerian leaders, or what do you draw out of that? The president described as someone who had a great conviction and led her country out of its economic woes.
That's a very good observation by our president, and that's what we expect of leaders. You must have some core convictions. You must have some vision of where you want to lead your country and so on. Hopefully not in a very rigid manner, but very clearly in a flexible but firm manner. She was a great leader, there's no question about it. A historical figure who survived almost 12 years as a British Prime Minister, the longest ever. That was very unusual.
Okay. Professor Chudi Wazorike, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Right.